You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast, and episode number 445 of the Mighty Blue Show. I am Mighty Blue, and we've got another great show today. Our main guest is Nick Kindred, a former NASA guy who had sectioned the trail for some years, but decided on retirement that he wanted to finish it in one big lash from Harpers Ferry all the way to Katahdin. Nick was able to get the full experience of a through hike, joining a loose tramley along the way, though over a shorter period of time away from home. His reflections include some interesting observations about being away from home and his wife's feelings about that. After Nick, we'll catch up with Michael Garsh and David Vos, or No Rush the Elder, and Professor Milkshake. Michael is starting to sample the delis in New York, while David is just about to hit New Hampshire. Let the party begin. After these two, we hear from Emily Leonard's book, Happy Hiking, where Emily calls upon Bruce all the way back down in Florida, leaving him a text message, Houston, we have a problem. My heart issue is still not bloody resolved, with my doctor screwing up my medical referrals, not telling me about it, then having my cardiologist tests and appointments cancelled this week. I managed to sort out some of the referrals and have another appointment tomorrow. Fingers crossed. No, I'm not hopeful. But impending problems notwithstanding, I've arranged another hike at the end of this month in preparation for my Wonderland hike next month. I'm going to be heading up to Amicalola Falls with my buddy, Andrew Cohen, to do the approach trail and the first few miles of the AT. It's about 27 miles, I think, all the way up to Neil Gap. It's happy memories for me, and I really can't wait. So let's get on with it and meet a spaceman. It's Nick Kindred, or Sergeant Pepper. Our guest today is Nick Kindred, or Sergeant Pepper. Hey, Nick, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I felt honored to be on your broadcast. I've listened to several interviews and really enjoyed them.
Cool. And you actually know some of the people who've been on the show. We'll talk about those in a minute. Now, when I heard you were Sergeant Pepper, I kind of assumed that was because you were a baby boomer and your band was the Beatles, but that wasn't how you got your name, was it?
No. Actually, though, I am a huge Beatles fan. They are probably my favorite band, so that was part of the reason why I kept the name. But the way I got the name was we were at a shelter one time with some of my buddies. There was about four of us that was hiking together. And I went down to get some water. And when I came back, my side of my hip, my thigh, my groin area, everything was just burning like crazy. And I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm having like a medical emergency or something. I told the guys, I said, if I die, just remember last thing I told you was this whole area was burning. And then when I looked down, I had some pants on. I could see orange around the pocket. And what happened was I discharged my pepper spray into my pocket. And the guys in the shelter thought that was pretty funny. And one of them said something like, Sergeant Pepper Pants. Or something like that.
There you
go. And of course, that was an immediate hit. And I thought it was a little long, the pants part. I vetoed the pants part. But like I said, I was a big Beatles fan. So I thought, yeah, I can keep Sergeant Pepper. But my buddies that I hiked with, they won't let it down. They want the pants on there.
Oh, right. There you go. I mean, you're the one who has to accept the name, and you accepted that one. So that is your name.
Right. Yeah.
So you first thought about doing this, doing the trail and getting involved in the trail about 20 years ago. Tell us how you even got to know about the Appalachian Trail.
Okay, so my daughter and I were in an organization called the Indian Guides. Now it's called the Adventure Guides. It was a YMCA program.
All right.
And it was a program where it's dad, for us, it was dads and daughters, dads and sons. And we camped a bunch. We car camped a whole lot. We went all over the place.
Nice. And
one of the merits, it had a merit program, kind of like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. So one of the merits was that you had to backpack out 1 mile, stay overnight, and backpack back. So I went ahead and I bought a couple cheap used backpacks off of eBay, And we went on family vacation up in North Carolina. And, I talked to my brother-in-law about it. And so we decided he would take his oldest son and I'd take my daughter. And we went down to Carver's Gap there in North Carolina.
You mean you went up to Carver's Gap? Because that's a long way up, isn't it?
Well, we were actually staying in Boone.
Right.
I think I went in a cabin up there. So we went over to Carver's Gap and we did the 1 mile walk out, found kind of a little rock outcropping to camp out on.
Nice.
It was probably legal camp out. I didn't know that at the time, but anyway, we went out there and it was a beautiful day. We went out and I remember looking out over the rolling hills and it just glowed to me. I mean, it was almost like the movie Avatar to me. The hills they were just beautiful and they just spoke to me and they inspired me. And I very vividly remember looking out over and seeing that. And then one of the other things I saw a couple backpackers going down the Appalachian Trail there. And, it kind of captured my imagination. I thought, man, how cool would that be to be walking the Appalachian Trail? So that was kind of the seed that kind of got me hooked on the Appalachian Trail. That was the initial seed. But
you told me that you had a moment out there. That was a moment of seeing the sun on the mountains, was it?
Yes.
There's something special about that, and there really is.
Yes, there was just like a glow. I can't explain it, but it really touched me. Yeah.
And you worked at NASA, didn't you? Where were you based, and what'd you do?
Okay, so I moved. I graduated from Purdue University. I grew up in Indiana, in the rural areas of Indiana, and so I moved down here. Started working at an aircraft plant, and then answered the ad for the space program because, I was like everybody. I remember watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon, and I was actually in Florida when I watched it, and I was always a huge NASA fan. I didn't think there was any way ever in my wildest dreams I could ever work for him. But an ad popped up while I was down here. So I went out and interviewed and amazingly got the job. And so in 1985, I started working on the shuttle program. It was still a pretty new program. Some of the shuttles hadn't even been launched yet. That was how new it was.
Wow. But that was exciting.
Yeah, it really was. There again, there was another moment. The first day I walked into the hangar with the space shuttle, I can remember the smell, I can remember the sights, I can remember the sounds just really vividly. And I walked in and looking around like, where's the space shuttle at? And I was underneath of it. They had it jacked up. And I looked up and I could see the tiles.
Oh, my gosh. It's funny, actually, what you just said about having a moment. I find my hiking life that I've had in the last 10 or so years to be about moments. It's those moments that surpass most of the things I've done in my life before. There's times when you're sitting down with somebody. I've got a picture sent to me by my friend Leidenot, who I hiked with in 2014. It's just the two of us sitting on a log in a quite dense forest, just quietly. And it's that moment that I remember as well. And it's a special moment that'll always stay with me.
Yeah. So, you have hiker hunger. And
sure,
everybody that's hiked for a long time, when you get hiker hunger, it's you have normal hunger, and then when you get hiker hunger, it's just like, really outside the norm if you've ever experienced that.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that's the way it is with like happiness on the trail and sadness on the trail. You have your normal happy, but when I was on the trail, I had moments where I was over the top happy,
sure,
and then I had moments that I was like sadder than I've been, in most of my adult life. So you really experience those extremes, and they implant on your memory. When you have that kind of moment, it implants on your memory.
Yeah, every emotion's enhanced, more than it ever is anywhere else. That was well put, where you put it. So you were still working when the AT bug hit you. That was back in, I think it was 2002 or something like that, just early 2000s.
Yeah, 2002 was when my daughter, I went back and just looked at the dates, and 2002 is when my daughter and I did the first hike. And then in 2004, oddly enough, the way I got started was I was part of this state powwow team that was putting on this big state camp out for the YMCA Indian guys. And the guy the main guy, they called him, the chief and stuff. So he was the main nation chief. And I met him, and we kind of hit it off as good friends. His name was Roland. His trail name's Tick Magnet. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But so we hit it off, and the first thing we started doing was surfing together. So there was a group of us that surfed, and there was another guy I met, Mike. His name was Speed Racer. That was his trail name, and so they had kind of taken their sons out and done a couple little hikes. One was on the Florida Trail for a couple nights, and then they actually did the first section of the Appalachian Trail. And when I was working with them, we got talking, and that next year they invited me to go along. And of course, that seed had been planted a couple years ago. That for them to come up and ask if I wanted to go on a 1 week trip with them the next year, I'm like, heck yeah, man, I'm all in. And the bet was set at that point, and the trajectory was set forward. And every year since then, I did not miss a year, even during COVID.
So what was it like? So they'd already gone on one section. Did you miss the first section then?
Well, I did miss the first section, and we kept marching up, and then our schedules kind of split, and we kind of got a little bit out of sync, and I started hiking with somebody else and his son. And we would always take our boys with us, and usually they had a friend, so we always had a gaggle of boys with us.
Nice.
And so I actually came back, looped around, and caught the first section from Springer up to Neal's Gap. I think in like 2011 or something. So about 3 years later, I came back and picked it up. But we kind of kept going, and like I say, we always had a gaggle of boys when we went up, and which was great entertainment.
Yeah, of course it was.
You get 4 12-year-old boys together, and that's good entertainment. But the nice thing I liked about, and I guess we'll probably talk about this a little bit more, but the nice thing I liked about those sections hikes is we could always go, we always went about the end of May. So all those hikes in the south, we always had beautiful azaleas,
lovely
rhododendrons. We had the mountain laurels. So every year we went up, it was just gorgeous. The hikes were just beautiful.
Well, you referred to your friend. I'm going to come to those hikes in a minute, but I'm going to go back to your friend Tick Magnet. There's obviously a story for that as well. Yeah, he on that first trip they did on the Florida Trail, I think he got something like 70 ticks on him. Florida has a lot of ticks. Oh my God.
Yeah, so that's how he got Tick Magnet.
So you were doing these week-long trips. How the problem with those of course is you have to stop after a week, right. And you I'm sure you don't want to do that. So what was it like? What was it like to hike for a week on the AT? Because it's more than just a day hike. You've got to take everything you need for a through hike really to go on a week, don't you?
Yeah. Well, the one thing about it is I always trained, Florida's a flatlander. We're flatlanders. So
sure.
I always did. I found that stairs worked out the best because you didn't want to go up there and just do 8-10 mile days for the week. We were trying to knock out between 75 and 100 miles a week. So we trained pretty hard, and it gave us, for me, it was good motivation to try to stay in shape. So I kind of looked at it that way. With section hikes, you get the luxury of taking nice food up and stuff like that. So, of course, the through hikers always end up with some good food at the end of your hike. But yeah, that was kind of frustrating. When you were starting to get to trail legs, and you had to get off and go back home and go back to work, and it was,
yeah.
kind of depressing.
Yeah, it must suck. And I know that you wanted because you eventually got to Harpers Ferry, didn't you? With these week-long trips, you got to Harpers Ferry, but you kind of saved the rest for retirement because you mentioned a retirement spreadsheet to me. Tell us about that, because it worked out to be better than you thought, didn't it?
Yeah. So probably. Yeah, probably something like about when I was probably about 52, 53. I kind of got to the point where I kind of got obsessed about these yearly hikes. And as soon as I'd get home, I'd go to work, and I had like a trail sheet pinned up on my cube, and I put little pin marks and stuff. And I thought, it would be really cool if I could get to halfway and I could do I knew the northern half was going to be hard, and I wanted to have trail legs when I got to New Hampshire and
sure.
Maine and everything. And I really wanted to complete. I got kind of obsessed about it. And so I laid out a spreadsheet, and I said, okay, I looked at my map. I kind of measured it. I said, okay, probably in this many years, I can be at Harpers Ferry. It just so happened it worked out that I would be 60 years old in that many years. So I looked at my financials, my 401k and everything, and I thought, I did the math, and I said, if I could save this much, if the market, gives me this return at 60, I should be able to retire. So, and then the first thing on my bucket list when I retire was I was going to immediately go walk the Appalachian Trail, and the second 1,200 mile. And I got super busy into work. I got kind of in a management job, and then when we were trying to get the Artemis 1 rocket up, which was the latest, NASA's effort to go back to the moon, I was on the first flight. I was managing operations for that, and we were extremely busy. And for like the last 2 or 3 years before launch, it was just round the clock operations, 7 days a week.
No, I'm
just
sure.
Super, super busy. And but I was sitting on my porch one night. It was like a Friday. No, I think it was probably like one of the weekdays. And I thought, I was having a drink out on the front porch, and I thought, I haven't looked at my finances in a long time. And I opened it up, and I'll be darned, I looked at it, and I hit my mark that I could retire. And it's like, holy smokes, I'm 60 years old. It actually worked. I don't know how I did it. But, of course, my attitude was really bad when I went into work the next day because I knew I could retire if they made me mad. So. But I went ahead and hung out. I stayed out there because the launch got delayed. It didn't actually happen until I was 61. So I stayed an additional year longer because I wanted to see that launch and get that under my belt. So
what was your role at NASA then? What were you doing?
Most of my years were as an engineer, kind of a test engineer. Probably the thing most people would relate to is during launch day, you would see the pictures of the guys on the console, before the launch during the countdowns. I was one of those guys.
Wow.
And so I was on what's called a main propulsion console. That's what the main engines that light at 5 seconds before launch. I was on that console.
Wow.
And supported the propellant flow from the big ET tank anyway. But so that was my job most of my career. And then towards the end of the shuttle, when the new program started up, NASA, they saw the writing on the wall that for shuttle,
sure,
there was going to have to be a lot of money expended to keep the shuttle program going. And what they really wanted to do is they wanted to transition from low Earth orbit ops to eventually going to Mars. Yeah. So to get to Mars, they wanted to go to the moon first, learn how to live on another planet, learn how to mine water from the soil,
sure,
learn how to turn it into oxygen, water, fuel. And the moon's only 3 days away. So that's where you do the testing ground.
Sure.
And once you figure that out, then you do that 2-year trip to Mars. You don't want to go to 2 years to Mars and then
I bet you're slightly sad that you're part of that now, the excitement of going to Mars and all that sort of stuff.
Well, I'm still consulting. I still do like very minimal hours. Right. Just to kind of keep
your hand on the keep your hand in.
Yeah, and it's easy. I can do it from home and stuff. But I do feel proud. My son, he graduated from UCF in aerospace engineering. So nice. He actually got a job. Like he literally started about 3 months before I retired and left. And so he's carrying on the tradition. So he is the third generation space worker. My father-in-law was an Apollo worker, and then I went shuttle, and now he's the new Artemis program. So I'll live it through him.
Keep it in the family. But you decided you could go at 60, and we're going to come back to your family later about how they approach this. You decided to go, and you. Having been doing this over weekends or long weeks rather, and across a couple of decades, your gear must have changed quite a bit over the years. How did you prepare for this hike, both physically and actually logistically, in terms of, what sort of gear did you take, or did you get a whole new bunch of stuff?
I did get a whole new bunch of stuff. Actually, my test run was probably the last year. It was 2022. I actually did 2 week and going into Harpers Ferry, but yeah, I knew I had to get my weight down. I knew it was going to be a different hike, and so it was a little more costly. I got my pack down probably to like 30 to 35 pounds, depending on how many days I was doing.
Sure.
So I would always carried pretty heavy on the section hikes, and I knew I couldn't do that. So that's kind of how that prepared. I did do my physical preparation. Mentally, I really didn't. I didn't prepare. I mean, it was kind of like this blunt club over the head when I got there.
Yeah, it's a shock, isn't it?
Well, especially, yeah, because I had gone from this really intense work schedule and retired, and then a couple weeks later went on the trail. So I was under a huge transition. You know, as soon as I quit working, you know, they had the big party and all that stuff. Then the next couple of weeks were spent preparing to go on the trail. And then when we got to the trail, my wife, it was her 60th birthday. So she wanted to do the Maryland. So she did the first Maryland part of it. And when we got to Penmar, and she dropped me off at the Penmar trailhead, I tell you, talk about another defining moment. Watching her drive away, it was cold, it was rainy.
Yes.
I'm walking down that trail and I'm not seeing anybody. And I'm like thinking to myself, what the heck am I doing? This is craziness. And I almost had I felt like I was having like a little bit of a panic attack because I didn't see anybody for the first 2 days. I didn't see people at shelters. I mean, it was nobody. And so for the first couple of days, I was like, oh my God, what have I done?
Well, you know, you're going to get those moments because there are times out there that it's harder than others. And seeing your family and somebody you love leave and then be by yourself.
That was hard.
It's tough, no question. And having done all those hard miles up to Harpers Ferry, when it came time to be out there for several months, were you ever tempted to go for an end-to-end through hike, or was the timing not right, or you just didn't want to do it?
No, I think the timing probably wasn't right. I mean, I really didn't want to be away from my family that long. I really didn't have that big desire to go back and repeat the trail sections I had done. You know, I've been there, done that, had several T-shirts from it, you know, so I didn't have a big desire to do that. I did kind of regret not being around all the thru hikers I was with. You know, they had a special camaraderie that they had that in common and stuff. So I kind of, you know, that would have been really nice to be part of the thru hike. But you kind of were. You were hiking with people. You did 1,000 miles, so it's still a heck of a long way. And I've often felt that section hikers have it much tougher than through hikers, because once we've got our legs as through hikers, we can walk forever, can't we? Right.
How different was your 2023 adventure when you did this in comparison to those shorter hikes? Did you see a massive difference?
Well, quite a bit of difference. I will say this much: to be a section hiker, to do the whole thing in a section, you have to have more dedication than a through hiker. I would say a through hike is harder than a section hike. Obviously, I mean you get through a lot of ups and downs. But so I think the difference is, one thing that I liked about the section hike over the years was I got to see all these trends come and go over a series of years, and that was pretty fun to watch.
I'm sure.
When I first started, the amount of women that were on the trail was a lot less.
Yes.
I mean, it was more of a guys kind of thing, and it's kind of fun to watch them kind of come in, and now it's probably almost 50-50. I don't know, but the styles of gear, you know, you saw a huge change. And back then there was ultralight wasn't a thing.
Yeah,
you know, it still had frame packs even and stuff. And my first one was a frame pack, and so I got to see that change. I saw changes in. Like there was one year where all the girls were getting burr haircuts, which was
what haircuts?
Burr haircuts, like getting their hair burred off, cut off.
Oh, right.
Which makes a lot of sense, you know. And then like last year, the trend I noticed was in the older guys, the 50s to 60-year-old guys. They all shaved. They were all bald, and you know they kept trimmed beards or shaved. The younger guys still had the big, you know, uncut beards and kind of sloppy bird's nest hair, you know, but all the older guys were all like primped up and, you know, looking good. I started out with a beard.
I shaved my head totally bald, both of my through hikes. Because you become somebody different. I think you become somebody different when you go out there, or you get a different version of yourself. Right. And you mentioned this about the older guys, and hiking the trail in our 60s, as you and I both were, it's probably a very different experience to hiking it in your 20s and 30s. Do you feel, as I definitely do, that while we may ache a lot more, our life experiences informed us a lot on this hike? Yeah.
Let's see. As far as I think I think I was better conversationalist. Like, with the trail the AT is very social.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing I liked about it was the young and the old, the people that have money, people don't have money, you're all in this together. And it's kind of almost like being in high school. Everybody's thrown together and you all get along really good. And everybody in the AT was just so open-minded and so nice. The young people wanted to talk to you and hear your stories and stuff. And in particularly, they liked my history of, space. A lot of people talked about that. And so, I don't know, I feel like I had a lot to offer, especially the younger people that, came up and talked, and I really enjoyed that part of it.
Don't you think, though, it's kind of surprising how easily it does fall away? There's the ages just seem to melt when you're out on trail.
They really do.
In the way they don't necessarily in normal life. And I think it's because there's this commonality of interest. We're all heading for the same place. We all know it's not a race, but we all want to get there. And we want our fellow hikers to succeed almost as much as we want ourselves to succeed.
And you're suffering together too. I mean,
yes, there's that as well. Yeah.
You commiserate together. I mean, even the young people. I mean, there was a lot of young people that I was faring better than they were. They were hurting, and so you're commiserating together. You're sharing victories together. You're sharing laughter together.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And age kind of goes away.
It's very. I don't know what it's like for the youngsters to meet the old guys, but for the old guys to meet the youngsters is awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
And I asked you when we spoke previously about high points or things that you particularly enjoyed, and your very first answer was hostels. Which ones were your favorite? Which ones were your favorites?
Oh gosh, let's see. Shaw's was very memorable, obviously, because it's right before you go into the 100-mile wilderness. And Preacher, he does this spill, and that was really cool.
Yeah.
The main roadhouse was really cool. There was one in Vermont. I can't remember what it was called, something like a waypoint or something like that. It was like, I think in the winter it was like a ski lodge or something.
All right.
But we just had a huge reunion there. I hiked with the guy Typical and Big Willie Dog, and Vegas was there, and all these different people that I've been hiking with. And we just had like the best weekend, just like probably 20 of us. And we just went out, we went bowling, we had just had a blast. I would say those were probably some of the favorites on the 2023 trip.
And you did have a couple of injuries, didn't you? Tell us about those and how they impacted your hike. Because I know you fell in Pennsylvania, didn't you?
Yeah. Those stupid little rocks, I call them stumble rocks. They're not the boulders. They're the little ones that stick out of the ground, little pointy ones. Those were the ones that would get me. Yeah. And I was bebopping along and tripped over one of those and went down. And the point of one of those hit me right in the side of the knee.
Ooh.
And it felt like I've had a torn meniscus before, and it felt like a torn meniscus. And it just, I got up, I limped it off, and it just kind of haunted me until finally in Vermont, I could live with it. It would kind of loosen up when I get going in the mornings and, kind of hurt in the evenings. But when we got to Vermont and my wife came, I went to a sports specialist there and got a cortisone shot, and that really cleared it up.
So
and then,
cleared it up in time for you to fall in New Hampshire, apparently.
Yeah. So I think it was around Gorham. I was coming out and I was in a hurry, and we had a lot of rain last year. 2023 was a big rain year.
Of course, yeah.
And those stupid little orange worms come out that get slime all over the place.
Yes,
what
I do.
I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And so there's a bunch of those around, and I was going down like a little, like about a 5-foot straight little ledge that was going. And you got to kind of get something to lower yourself down on those and stuff.
Yeah.
So I had grabbed a hold of a small little tree to lower myself down, and my hand slipped off, and I did a free fall backwards and landed about a 5-foot free fall and landed on my back on this rock.
Wow.
And I really thought I broke my back or broke my hip. I mean, I hit so hard it just jarred me. And I just laid on the ground, kind of looked up in the sky, and it's like, went through a little checkout of my fingers, my toes, make sure everything was, but so I didn't, break my back, but I got up and it felt like my back was out of place, like a disc was probably out of place or something. So I got into town and I kind of worked it out, and I could live with it again. I kind of lived on Advil kind of from that point forward. And then got to Shaw's, and right before the 100-mile wilderness, I was helping carry a case of Cokes in or something, and I don't know if that did it, but something pulled my back out, a spasm my back out. And so through the whole 100-mile wilderness, I was just in agony. And I was just popping Advil. And, I couldn't give it a chance to rest because we had a kind of a tramily that I was with. And we all wanted to finish together.
Yeah.
I think Vegas probably told you about that. It was Lost in Town, Beaker, myself, Vegas, Big Willie Dog, and Double D. We all did the 100-mile wilderness together.
Yeah. And you made it. I mean, how satisfying and how exciting was it that morning as you prepared to climb Katahdin? Because it's a special moment because you know that unfortunate accidents aside, you're going to make it, aren't you?
Yeah.
How was it that morning?
Yeah. Well, I was on adrenaline high, so nothing was bothering me that morning. And you're climbing hand over fist. At that point, I'd gotten smart. I went and bought a $5 pair of like little garden gloves and put on when I was going up rocks and stuff, so I wouldn't slip again. And myself and Lost in Town went up together, and I'm just hollering going on the way up, just bring it on, Katahdin, And we scampered up that, and about 3/4 of the way up, I'm huffing and puffing, and Lost in Town like, you still want Katahdin to bring it on? Nah, they can ease up a little bit. But and we were so lucky just to have probably the ideal day that we went up there. And it was the same thing as back in Carver's Gap. I mean, that day, the place was just glowing, and I was on cloud 9 all the way up that mountain. It was the best day.
It is special time, no question.
Yeah.
Now, it was over, and we often talk about...
We shed some tears a little bit.
Of course you should. And we often talk about the support of family from home, specifically, of course, your spouse. And you told me that she was all in when you first went, but that all wasn't quite as well when you returned. You told me you told me I could talk about this. So tell us about your conversations with your wife and how that kind of worked out.
Yeah, she had a little buyer's remorse, I think, when I came back. She was she was into it, but I don't think either one of us realized how long 3 months is on the trail. I mean, 3 months on the trail just seems like 3 years. I don't know.
Try 6 months.
Yeah, I bet. Time just felt like it slowed down. And when I got back, she came up to pick me up. We decided to have a long meandering drive back and just kind of let me transition back into civilian life gradually. And we were going to go to Acadia and Shenandoah Park and stuff and do a little hiking and stuff. Well, she started getting a fever right before she gets on the plane. And by the time she got up to Maine, she had full-on COVID.
Oh, gosh.
So, and of course, the next day I got COVID, or next 2 days. So our trip was spent with COVID on the way back. So that was a bad start to the reunion. But but we got back, and I was surprised because she said that she saw my posts and stuff about my great adventure, and and she's stuck at home, and we have a special needs adult daughter, and and she even though she lives independently, she still has to be kept up with, and she's home paying the bills and doing all this stuff, and I'm up with friends and having this epic adventure.
Sure.
And so she had, and which is understandable. I totally get it, and I'm kind of slow to the ball game. So I totally got it. But probably what bothered me the most was she kind of felt like that. I was having this whole other life with this other people, and kind of like. Kind of forgetting about her, kind of pulling away from, and which was totally not that was not the case. When you're hiked that long, you spend many, many hours walking and thinking about your life and thinking about the people that are important to you.
Indeed.
And the one that always popped up on the top was always my wife. I thought more about her than anybody on the trail. And matter of fact, towards the end, it's like I couldn't listen to a slow song or anything without getting all teary-eyed and stuff. So that was not the case. If anything, it drew us closer, and we had good conversations, and I understood her point. I get it. And then, she understands kind of why I felt like I need to be doing this now in my 60s, So, but it led to a lot deeper conversations, and I think I was more able to tell her kind of, what she meant to me and stuff. And I think if anything, she got a better husband when I came back. So.
And in many ways, actually, those conversations are ones that people should consider having before they go on this trip, because you're right, 3 months is a long time, but 6 months is a heck of a long time. So, knowing that how long that is, you people need to have that conversation. And I appreciate you talking about that, because you had the conversation and you came through it. But a little wrinkle on that has come up a bit, because you want to go on the PCT next year, don't you?
So I hadn't quite gotten the hike bug out of my system. I did a Peru hike in January. She didn't want to go, but I went with some friends, and we did a 5-day hike up to Machu Picchu. That was kind of nice. And then we were a bunch of us. There was a whole big class of people from 2023 and the flip floppers that are going to go do the PCT this year, starting in April. How many of
you going then, or how many think you're going?
Probably. Well, Vegas, being the Pied Piper, he's got a whole bunch of people I've never met, but I would say there's probably 15 people or so that I probably know of that's going to start, and from the class of 2023. And so
how'd you raise that conversation?
Well, originally I said I would like to do some the PCT with these guys. I'd like to start them out. And we had negotiated down to a month and a half, so so my plan was to do like five section hikes of it. And we had some more talks about it. She was like, gosh, I'm going to have to deal with this every summer. So she says, why don't you just do a through hike? She says, just get it out of your system. She says, this time I won't be sitting around waiting. I'm going to plan my whole schedule. I'm going to go off and do some vacations and do some girl stuff. And which I totally encouraged. And so she's going to lay out a little better plan. And after talking to you the other day, I was going to do like in 2 halves. So I kind of decided 3 months is probably the longest I wanted to be away. But when you told me, I'd probably regret it.
Yes.
So we went back and had another conversation. And so the way we've left it, and she's totally good with it, And she said, why don't you just go, and you just go as long as you want. And we won't schedule anything during that 6-month period. If you want to do the whole thing, you do the whole thing. If you get homesick and you want to come home, then
that is such a fantastic attitude. And the good thing about it is you've had the conversation, you see where she's coming from, and it isn't easy for those left behind. So good on her, and good for you. And tell her she can blame me now if you do stay out for the whole 6 months.
I think I did. I think I did tell her that actually.
Okay, man. Well, look, I hope you do it and you come back and tell us about the PCT. But thanks for coming on and sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I feel very honored that you had me, and if you need some names of some good characters, I will forward some more names to you.
I much prefer bad characters.
I'll give you plenty of bad characters.
Okay, man. Well, good talk to you, okay? Cheers, then.
All right, thank you.
Bye. He sounded like he embraced the life of a through hiker and had the full experience. I've always thought that section hikers have it tougher than through hikers. Well, that's starting again nonsense. It would kill me to put in a week or so just to get my legs starting to work better than having to go home again. But these longer sessions, where you can spend months on trail, clearly fueled his ambition to do more going forward. And I thought his comments about his wife were very on point. They had the discussion, and it was clear that neither of them had fully understood what that separation meant for the two of them. Those of you considering this, or indeed any other long hike, might think about having that conversation with your own spouse or partner and trying to gain some understanding of the strains that it can produce in a relationship. I'm glad he was happy for me to ask him more about that discussion, because it's kind of an important discussion to have. Now, I caught up with an unhappy Michael Garsh earlier this week. Let's find out what's up with him. Here's Michael.
Hey, Mighty Blue.
Hey, Michael, how are you?
Fine. Can you hear me well?
I'm hearing echo. Oh, that's better.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Hi. Well, first, how you doing?
It's another hot day. We always laugh because they keep saying it's record breaking and it's heat advisory, and we laugh about that. They say don't do strenuous exercises as we're hiking. So my buddy Chopsticks that I've hiked with since the Fontana Dam. We were hiking the other day. We spent the night at Graymore. and we were hiking down, and he fell, and he was okay, and he got up, and we hiked a little bit more, and we were hiking down some steps, and all of a sudden his knee just popped, and we were about 2.5 miles from Dennytown Road, so it took us about 3 hours to get there, and we got there, and I called an Uber, and we went to the emergency room, and they x-rayed it and said there was no broken bones, but he could hardly put any weight on it. So it was one of the hardest things I had to do was put him on the train the next day and watch him go to New York City and go home.
Wow, that's sad. How long were you hiking with him then?
Since Fontana Dam. So it's probably, it's since, the middle of March, the middle of February.
And when was this?
It happened about 3 days ago.
So you obviously miss hiking with a partner. You get into a routine together. Are you by yourself again now?
I am.
How do you feel? You sound a bit down about it.
Yeah, I miss him.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. But he would obviously want you to carry on to get to the end. Yep. You're not starting to doubt yourself at all, are you?
No, I'm going to finish it. And, I take a lot of pictures, a lot of videos, and, it's things that he would want to see, so. Yeah,
sure. Yeah, there's in that case, there's a good purpose to take those pictures and make sure that he sees them as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, we haven't spoken for a couple of weeks, so let's talk about your trip back home. How long were you off trail? 9 days.
And Chopsticks went with us. We went to upstate Michigan to a family reunion, and a lot of them I had never met before, and went to Mackinac Island and relaxed. It was nice to have a shower every day.
Yeah, I bet it was. Yeah. So how long were you there before you started getting antsy and wanted to get back on trail?
About 2 days.
Funny how that is, isn't it? However lovely a shower is, and it is, no doubt about it, and flushing toilets are wonderful. Once you're on the trail, you're living that life then, aren't you?
Yeah, you are. It was nice just to eat whatever you want and have it readily available, but you know what? You want to get out there and you want to finish what you started.
Yeah. So how did people react to you? Did you know most of the people at this event?
I did. They were shocked how thin I was because they've never seen me this thin.
Right.
But I felt good, and it was nice seeing them. But like I said, I was ready to get back on the trail.
I'm sure you were. And so what? I know that you sent me a note talking about body changes. So you talked about weight, appetite, feet, and psyche. So let's go through those. So how did your body change in that just 9? Is it 9 days? You say you're off trail? 9 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
My body, I probably gained in maybe 3 days, probably 10 pounds. And I think a lot of it was water weight because, we get really dehydrated out here.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Trying to drink as much as we can. And like I said, the appetite, I thought I would just eat everything I could get my hands on. That didn't really happen, I was surprised. My feet, I got to rest. It was nice, but when the first couple of days I was back out, I had a blister that formed. They're like, wait a minute, that's underneath the callus.
Oh dear.
And the psyche, you had said before, after you tell the story about a dozen times, they get tired of hearing it.
They do.
Okay.
And you know what, though? That's all you're going to want to talk about for the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Oh, dear. So you got back on trail. And so how long, when did you actually get back on? And then how long after that was Chopsticks injured?
So we got back on, I'm trying to think what day it was. It was right around the end of July. The last few days, it was a Sunday. I don't remember what the date was. And we stayed there at Glenwood Lake, and we started. We got a shuttle out to where we finished that, and then he got injured probably 2 or 3 days after we started back. And
so before you get back to the injury, which we're going to in a minute, how did you feel about getting back on? Were you excited to go back, or do you think, oh my God, this is I've got comfortable being at home or being somewhere else?
And until we started hiking, we were like, oh man, I'm glad we're back at this. And then, the heat hits you and you start getting tired and you're like, what am I doing? and you get to the first water cache and there's no water there. And you're like, okay, let's go.
Oh God. So are you getting many water caches or not?
In northern New York, there are water caches. But in central and southern New York, there was not. I mean, there was many times we would walk up to the water cache and there was probably 8 or 9 empty gallon jugs there.
Oh, that's horrible, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's just like when we passed the 1,400 mile mark, the Appalachian Trail Conference doesn't want you to cross the Pacific Palisades. They've taken the trail and made it go north.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Over the bridge. Well, you know what? There was no water, and we looked, and the old trail was right there. It was a blue blaze, and there was water there. And we're like, you know what? We're going to blue blaze this. So we actually went over there and got water. And I'm glad we did, because we went to the called West Mountain Shelter. That is got the prettiest view of any shelter I've ever been to. You can see all of the Hudson River overlooking the lights came on at night, and you could off the distance you could see New York City. It was really pretty. I'm glad we went. And there was only Chopsticks, myself, and one other hiker there.
And I know seeing the views of New York City are pretty special from the trail. And you on a clear day you can see it quite easily, can't you, as well?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And you've been a bit surprised about New York. How so?
See, I've hiked some in the southern part and along the ridge, and I was really, really surprised that how much rock was in New York. I mean, tons and tons of rock. And then today, when I came up to Tony's Deli at mile 1454, there's a swamp with a bridge walk. It's really long. I didn't even know that was there. I mean, all the videos I've seen, I've never seen it before, and that was really pretty. But I was surprised at all the rock and how little water there was in the southern part.
So, how are you approaching being by yourself? Have you changed at all how you hike? Because I know when you hike with somebody, you do tend to compromise a lot for each other, don't you?
Yeah, I'm always checking on him, and he's a little bit slower than I am, so I make sure. And he's also a type 2 diabetic, so I'm very punctual about when we stop and eat and how much we eat and the rest breaks. But without him, there's times I forget to eat.
Right.
And I just keep going, and it's like, you know what? I think I haven't drank in probably an hour. I probably need to drink some water.
Yeah, it's funny actually though, Michael. You need to reestablish whatever your rhythm is going to be, because if you're going to be by yourself the rest of the way, you need to get that rhythm back.
Right. Yeah.
So well, look, have you stayed when you had 9 days off trail? Did you stay in touch with any of the other hikers you'd met on trail?
I did. It's funny because some people texted me and go, "You broke your rib. We were listening to Mighty Blue, and we heard that you broke your rib." I'm like, "Oh!" And this was a lady named Sparrow and her dog Micah. She's has a doctorate in physical therapy, and she really helped Chopsticks and I with some
nice.
Some issues when we first started, and then another lady that I hadn't talked to in probably 4 months. Her name's Pat Flip. She's a retired firefighter out of Maine. She also texted me and said, "Are you okay? I heard you broke your rib." So yeah.
Funny how it goes, isn't it? People listen and they know who you are through the show. And how is your rib, by the way?
It quit aching. I'm glad. I mean, it took about a month for it to quit aching at night, but it's still deformed. It'll never go back, but at least it doesn't hurt anymore.
So, what's the plans now? You're enjoying the delis in New York, no doubt, I presume, because it's a great meeting place in New York. When you go to these delis, people are always in there, aren't they?
This is the first one I've been to.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll love them. You'll love them. You absolutely love them. They're great. And what's the plan? Are you planning on hiking the rest of the way by yourself, or would you be open to getting somebody else to hike with?
If I have to hike the rest by myself, I'll do it. But if somebody's that's going my speed wants to hike, that'd be great. Because I have found that, I used to think that I like being alone. After being with Chopsticks, nope. Yeah. The hardest time I think is first thing in the morning and when you're done hiking in the evening.
Yes, I imagine.
Yeah, somebody to talk to what you did that day.
But aren't there plenty of people on the trail anyway? So there's always someone around, isn't there?
There is, but I mean, it's getting fewer and fewer. I'm getting towards the tail end of the bubble.
Right. Okay.
Like I stayed at Stan Morgan Shelter last night. I think that's the name of it. But anyway, there was a Sobo that came in, and it was him and I in the shelter, and then 2 people tenting, and that was it.
Oh, yeah. Well, you will meet others, and you may choose to hike with somebody, but you've got to get that routine right again and get yourself going and make yourself comfortable with what you're doing, and just enjoy the rest of it as much as you can. What do you reckon? What do you reckon your time is looking like now? Because you're about mile. How many miles are you through?
1454.
Okay, and you started when?
February 1st. But
okay.
like I said, my miles are going to pick up. But when it gets to be about the middle of September, I will look at it, and if it doesn't look like I will get to Katahdin on time, I will flip up and do Katahdin and head back south.
Okay, cool. Okay, man. Well, look, sorry to hear about Chopsticks, and I can hear the sound of your voice. You don't sound happy about it, but then, why would you? He's been part of your life for a long time, and you even spent at a break from the trail with him as well. So, look, just keep your chin up and keep hiking, and we'll catch up soon, okay?
Thank you, Steve. You have a great day.
Thank you, buddy. Take it easy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
He was clearly dealing with a new reality out on trail. It happens when you least expect it. They were so tight that Chopsticks joined Michael and his family for 9 days, keeping the band together and heading back to the trail together to carry on their hike. But stuff happens. All hikers know that we're potentially just one step away from a calamity, and in Chopsticks' case, it just wasn't meant to be. These trail relationships can be extremely strong in a way that I wasn't really expecting them to be, and I can understand how Michael feels now. I do hope he's able to compartmentalise that feeling and move forward as the happy guy has been to this stage. We're going to find out soon. Now, this. Hear ye, hear ye. The Alder Gathering will be taking place this coming October in Abingdon, Virginia from the 11th to the 13th. And for those of you happy to stay over on Monday the 14th, there'll be a trail work trip to enable you to give back to our awesome hiking community. It's not expensive, just $25. Though if you shift yourselves, you can take advantage of the early bird rate of just $20 if you sign up by August the 15th. You can make it a really cheap yet fun weekend by camping for free at the site. And a special bonus, all 2024 completed through hikers can register for free, and you'll even get your special recognition at the event. There are hiking-related workshops throughout the weekend, while the keynote speaker on Saturday night is none other than one of our previous guests, Brianna DeSanctis, or Rocky Mountain High. Brianna was the first solo female to thru-hike the American Discovery Trail, and I can tell you, as someone who's interviewed her, she's a lot of fun and she really knows her stuff. And talking of fun, there'll be competitions and games throughout, while another friend of the show, the inimitable Miss Janet, will be sharing tales from the trails later on the Saturday. If you live anywhere near, or even if you have to travel, come along and support Alder in this joyous weekend. You can register at the Alder website, and the link will be in the show notes. Thanks, as ever, goes to our wonderful donors. With the end of the month and outgoings pretty high, it's always good to see those donations coming in. This week, our recurring donors who've stuck with us are David Santi, Mike DiCello, Alan Troy, Jens Leberheider, Brian Helton Jr., Lisa Rana, Woody Bass and Natisha Webb, with a new recurring donation from Paul Chauvel. Additionally, my buddy Eric Gross chipped in again this week. Thanks to all of you. We just couldn't do this without your help. So now it's the turn of Professor Milkshake himself, David Vose. And this week, David has been doing some thinking. I should point out, by the way, that I recorded David, then immediately lost the recording as my software spat me out. But troopers that we both are, we just got straight back on the phone. And I'm glad that we did. Here's David.
Hello.
Hey, David. How are you?
Good, Steve. How are you?
I'm as good as I was. I'm as good as I was 15 minutes ago when we first recorded this. we've had what might be very easily be called a technical snafu. I called it something else a few minutes ago, but I won't go into that right now.
All right.
So we're gonna have the same chat again, I guess. But where are you? Where are you now?
So I'm at the Lookout Cabin, which is mile 1725.
Right.
It's about a third of a way between Rutland and Hanover.
And that's the one with the roof deck, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So who's it? Yeah, whose is that cabin then? Who's it owned by?
I don't know. It's not. I don't believe it's an ATC facility.
Right.
I think it's privately owned, and they just generously provide access to the hikers.
Wow. Was it like inside? I didn't actually go inside. I climbed up to the roof. God knows why I didn't go inside. What's it like?
It's nice. There's a fireplace. There's a big open floor on the first level, and then there's a loft where I slept with 7 other people on the second floor.
Right. And how many were there? How many were there?
Close to 25 people.
Oh my gosh! Was it?
And
cozy?
Very cozy. The cookie lady in Massachusetts told us that she thinks the Sobo and the Nobo bubble are colliding this week, and I think we probably saw a little bit of that here last night.
Oh, right. So tell us about bumping into Sobos, because they've done the tough bits you're about to do. Do they tell you horror stories?
No, they don't. We ask, and they pretty much say it was wonderful. You're going to love it. It's not as bad as it sounds. Be careful of the weather. Take it slow.
How sweet! How sweet of them to lie so kindly to you. It's just as bad as it sounds, but better. Just so much better than you can ever imagine.
Looking forward to it.
So you spoke to the cookie ladies. Now, did you go into her place, because she sometimes leaves stuff out, doesn't she?
I stopped by and picked blueberries.
Right,
and she cooked me a very nice breakfast.
Oh, that's very nice indeed. Very nice.
Yeah.
So you're in Vermont, and I know when we spoke only 5 minutes ago, you talked about the thing that Vermont's famous for, the bloody mud. So talk us through it.
Well, it was funny. Right when you cross over into Vermont, and there's a sign for the Long Trail, there's a big, bog of mud in front of you. And the trail has, it was just noticeably more muddy, and actually more erosion. I'd have to say, noticeably more erosion in Vermont. But the mud's been, there's a lot of it, and the rain hasn't helped, but it's not unmanageable. It's not like last year in the stories we've heard about redirects and things like that.
Yeah, well, they had horrendous rain last year. But you're actually, you say in your note to me that and we didn't talk about this before actually, that you are forecast a lot of rain because there's this storm coming up, obviously the East Coast now.
Right.
But it's going very slowly. So when is that due to hit you? Do you know?
I don't know. The forecast looks generally wet for the next week. I don't know if that's part of the system that's coming up from the south, or it's just blowing in from the west, but it has been wet and it will be wet. We're just hoping it's not going to be wet like last year. And
right.
Because northern Vermont got really hammered. I think it was last week. They had roads and bridges washed out and things like that. So we're hoping that doesn't affect us down here.
Yeah. Well, 6 months on the trail, you're going to get all the weather in the world, aren't you? So,
Sure. Yeah.
It's one of those things you just have to live with it, and you will live with it, and you'll make it work. And it's one of the beauties of the trail. I've hiked this trail twice now, and I've hiked it differently each time, and I've hiked it differently than any other person out there, because you all have your own things you have to manage, don't you? And
right.
and it's one of those things it's important to do. And you mentioned that you've been through Massachusetts, and you rather liked it. So what was so good about it?
I mean, it's a beautiful state. There were things that just stand out in my mind, like Upper Goose Pond, which is great.
Well, for listeners, tell people about that.
There's a lovely pond there where you can go. There's a boating. You can swim. There's a dock there.
Yeah.
And then there's a lovely cabin, enclosed cabin with a fireplace and a big bunk room. They make you pancakes in the morning. If a Sobo brings blueberries from the cookie lady, then you can have blueberry pancakes in the morning. It's just a great setting, a really nice stop. And then not too long after that, there's the cookie lady.
How much did they charge you at Upper Goose Pond?
Nothing. It's
Was it free?
It's free. Yeah, it's a ATC shelter. Yeah. Yeah,
that's cool. That's good. See, I didn't even remember that. I apologise for repeating this. So I did tell you the story a couple of minutes ago. This one that in 2014 on my through hike, I met this woman called, and I can't remember what her name is, the Purple something or other. So it was 3 words, and her thing was tagging through hikers, and she by tagging them, she would put purple nail polish on their fingers, and you chose the fingers you wanted polished. And it speaks to the culture of this trail that you do things out there you wouldn't normally do in a normal life. I would never, ever, ever agree to have somebody to put nail polish on my fingers. But you know what? It seemed just the circumstance where you should do. So I did. I gave her 2 of my fingers, and she covered them in purple, which took bloody ages to get off, by the way, about another 3 or 4 weeks before it actually left. And you say you've been having some unexpected reunions, and I know when we spoke before, it was a particularly poignant reunion because a whole bunch of people you've been hiking with. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, we were in Manchester Center, and we stayed at the Green Mountain House. Mm-hmm. And everybody in the house, with the exception of one lady who was now a new friend, they were people that I'd hiked with for significant distances over the length of the trail. The only person missing was Sloggy, because I hiked with him. We went through Grayson Highlands together and stayed together for a while. But everybody there were old friends that we had spent a lot of time with on the trail, and I got kind of emotional about it because, it's like the family, my old family coming together. So it was just wonderful, and we cooked a big dinner, and everyone sat down and enjoyed and talked, and it was wonderful.
Look at you getting all emotional. How about that? about people you meet on a trail. That I'm sure that must be one of your real unexpected revelations of this trail. I think that everything you do on this trail exacerbates everything else. All the emotions are there. You're much more emotional on the trail than you normally are in real life. Do you find that yourself?
Oh yeah, it's shocking. There've been several times when
shocking.
Well, there are points where it's just so beautiful. You're thinking about the people, the experience, and there've been a couple times when I've had tears in my eyes, and I'm not that type of person at all, but it just brings it out.
Yes, totally.
All your senses are affected, and you kind of can't help it.
I think because you open yourself up to it. I think, when you're out there, you recognize how damn lucky you are to be out there, and you're living an adventure you probably never dreamed you'd actually fully realize, and you're realizing that dream now, and you're now getting, you're now approaching the New Hampshire border, and it gets more. It doesn't get less emotional, by the way. It gets more emotional towards the end. And the funny thing is, most of the people I've spoken to on this show, when they get to Katahdin, the realization of that dream is kind of flat, surprisingly flat. It's more muted than you would imagine, because you almost think, well, what's next? What do I do now? Mm-hmm. And I know because we mentioned it about a quarter of an hour ago, but you've actually had some thoughts about what's next, haven't you? So share those.
Yeah, the trail, I think, changes everybody, and I've been doing my job for 28 years, and I think that it's going to be time when I get back, and I settle up with the university, giving back the time for the sabbatical, that
sure.
I want to move on and do something. I've always wanted to do something outdoors. I've been sitting in front of a computer for a long time, and so I really would like to get outdoors and try to give back to the trail and do something that's just entirely different. And
would it be this trail? Would it be this trail?
Very possibly. We're an hour and a half from the Water Gap. That's the closest we come to the trail.
All right.
But I live in northeastern PA, and There's a lot there. Upstate New York has a lot of opportunities. So we'll see.
Yeah. Do you know, that's exciting. You know, I think it allows you to frame your life and look back on your life and look forward on your life. Although I do say, I think a lot of people, when we set out, we think, oh, right, I've got a nice long time to think about what's going to happen and what I'm going to do and this and that and the other. And you cross the border into Maine, you think, oh my God, I'm in the last state. I haven't worked anything out at all.
That is so true. You think you're going to have plenty of time for big thoughts, and you spend so much time just thinking about where you're going to stay tonight and all the kind of details of the trail that you don't really have that time that you thought you would.
Yeah, but you know what? In the background, it's still happening. You're still having those thoughts. So, the fact that you've just articulated them as well, is a good thing. Well, look, I'm glad we called up. Thanks for bearing with me after my technical mess going on here.
Sure.
But it looks like it's all recorded now, so we'll catch up soon, okay?
Okay, great. Sounds good to see.
Okay, man. Take it easy.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah, see ya. Bye.
What a conversion David seems to be having. He can see from this hike that he wants to make a change to working in the outdoors. I often say be prepared for changes that may come with a through hike. It doesn't happen to everybody, of course, but we've heard similar stories over the years of the impact a hike has had on somebody's life. So be open to it, but be careful what you wish for, because it may happen to you. And by the way, that story about getting my fingernails tagged purple was by a young woman known as Triple P, or I think it was Purple Polish Pimp, I think it was, but I couldn't swear to it. She was a lot of fun though, and I remember it all so clearly to this day. And just before we get on to Emily's book, I've had quite a week, I can tell you. Not only was I really pissed off with my doctor situation, but I had a bit of an adventure with my car. I was driving along in the heavy rain on Monday morning when my car, a 2021 Subaru, shuddered as I was at some lights. I managed to pull off the road into a McDonald's parking lot and it died completely. My insurer provides roadside assistance, so I got a tow to a nearby repair shop before Dana came to pick me up and take me home. This shop worked diligently all day long trying to find a solution, but it had to concede in the end that it really needed to be towed to the Subaru main dealer in South Tampa, as it seemed to be a computer issue. Now, I know nothing about cars, by the way. Anyway, my insurer got a towing company who set off that night. And it turns out that the tow truck aquaplaned, crashed, and dropped my car off the truck. Eventually, they re-towed the car and kept it in a secure facility overnight. That's when things started to get weird. The tow company went into radio silence, and it was only today, nearly 48 hours after the incident, that I was able to get in touch with them. They apparently totaled the car. The driver was in shock, but otherwise unharmed, and they eventually got the car to the Subaru dealer sometime this afternoon. So, I'm out of car, a claim has at last been made, and I'm shocked at this crappy communication from my tow company and their insurers. When I was in the insurance business, you communicated, you sorted stuff out, and you tried your damnedest to make things right. It didn't happen here, and this just capped off a lousy couple of days. Still, as I always say, things can only get better. Talking of which, let's wrap up today with the next chapter of Emily Leonard's book, Happy Hiking, in which Bruce, her wonderful husband, goes above and beyond to help her out. I wish you'd been my bloody insurance agent this week, I can tell you. I'll see you next week. Chapter 7, The Rescue. Colin had parked at the road, a tenth of a mile away from the shelter. He said he needed to shuttle his first patrons to the house, but promised it would be a quick return. Andrew, Mozzie and I waited in the parking area. While waiting, I realised that I had blue blaze from the trail to the shelter, then blue blaze out to the parking lot, missing about 300 yards of white blazes. It wasn't a big deal, but I wanted to stay to my purest ways, so I hiked back to where the junction of the shelter had taken me off the AT. I then hiked back down, thus missing no white blazes. Andrew, Mozzie and I nestled under a fir tree to gain shelter from the oncoming rain, while we learned the real meaning of quick. We had enjoyed a couple of days of dry weather and cowered from the cold, damp feeling that was returning so quickly. The evergreen provided just enough cover to keep us from getting soaked. The 20 minutes we were quoted turned into 30, then into 40. Then, just shy of an hour later, our ride returned. Colin arrived none too soon, and we were off to town. First stop was a grocery store, so we wouldn't have to backtrack. I offered to cook for us if Andrew would split the tab with me and help with the dishes. An experienced grocery shopper knows the importance of going to the store with a list and a full stomach. I had neither, My stomach was below empty, as a matter of fact. I bought enough to feed a small army, which turned out to be good. There were 2 other hikers who accepted my offer to feed them for a $10 per person donation. Feeding 4 hungry hikers is about the same as feeding an army. The home-cooked menu was a bargain. It consisted of my family's famous chicken tenderloins baked in a secret sauce, caterpillar baked potatoes and salad with homemade blueberry wine dressing. The sauce I had made up at home one day when I was tired of plain chicken. I decided to be creative, using whatever was in the fridge. I didn't want a barbecue sauce. Mayonnaise, mustard and ketchup found their way to the counter, along with what I call the quattro spices: pepper, onion powder, garlic powder and salt. I mixed them up, coated the chicken, then baked. The caterpillar potatoes are a large Idaho baker, sliced thin but not cut all the way through, placed in a shallow sheet pan. I prefer stoneware. The spuds are coated with lots of melted butter and freshly minced garlic, salt and pepper, then baked. I baste the potatoes with the buttery mixture every 15 minutes until they're done. As they cook, they fan out slightly, resembling a caterpillar. For the salad dressing, I used some of Colin's Maine wild blueberry jam and wine. When you bought this book, I bet you didn't think it was a recipe collection as well. My gift to you. You're welcome. I went on this journey as a vacation from my domestic engineering duties, and what was the first thing I did when given the chance? Cooked and cleaned. Yep, go figure. The next day wasn't any better. Andrew and I decided we didn't want to go back out into the woods just yet, and we also didn't want to spend more money on lodging, so we made a deal with Colin. We needed some serious cleaning done, and we wanted to stay one more night. We did a work for stay. More like I did a work for stay. Colin charged us $30 per person per night. If I helped to clean, he would only charge $30 for both of us for the second night. I said that was perfect. Back home, I charged $15 an hour to clean, and I estimated it would take me 2 hours to spiffy up the areas he requested. Deal. Andrew needed to tend to some phone calls, so I told him I would take care of the dirty work. Colin's home was a small ranch built in the late 60s, my guess, and not much looked like it had been changed since that time. Everything worked, it was just outdated, old and not so clean. Not filthy, just in need of some TLC. Colin was a nice man, a laid-back, natural kind of guy. He expressed this through an overwhelming decor of Asian textiles, knickknacks, candles and lack of lighting. I set out to do my chores while our host ran errands. 4 hours later, I was done, a little over budget on our deal. No problem. I've never minded doing above and beyond what was expected of me. Just when I thought I could call it quits and actually rest on my 0 day, Colin returned home. He asked me if I would go with him on a quick trip to pick up a van, then drive his car back. I figured I could squeeze in one more helpful deed. I failed to remember his definition of quick. The trip was not speedy. He needed a few things for the place and wanted my help. How could I say no? I spent my whole day off helping a stranger, and I still had to partially pay for the second night. I really don't think he had a clue what he was asking. I just so wanted to rest but felt bad for him. I did want him to have success with his new business. Time to head back to the trail, but not before we filled our tummies at the hiker-famous First Baptist Church of Franklin. Every year in the spring, they offer a free pancake and bacon breakfast to hungry hikers. They'll pick you up at the local hotels and deliver you back after breakfast. Colin gave us a ride to the church, where we found some of our hiking buddies, Midnight, Lunch Lady and Mighty Mouse. The friendly hosts encouraged us to eat until we burst. I could not eat the pancakes, but I did have an endless helping of bacon, orange juice and hot cocoa. Along with serving us food, they took our photo, printed it and gave it to us with a note card. I sent my photo home to the boys so they could see I was doing fine. Midnight sent his to the VA clinic he had escaped to show he could not only walk, but was out doing it on the Appalachian Trail. The church had a 2-hour window for serving. When it was time to finish up, a member of the group gave a reading from Scripture. It was a nice touch. They provide food, love and fellowship. So many people will give you advice that is hypocritical, a do as I say, not as I do kind of advice. They were not just talking about how to live, they were living those words. It was also a great reminder of the importance of service to others, the reason we are here on this earth. It helped to ease my frustration of the day before when my precious 0 day was used to take care of someone else instead of my own needs. Good goes around. March the 25th brought us 2 days past Franklin to a stone throw away from the Nantahala Outdoor Centre, known as the NOC, in North Carolina. It's an adventure complex complete with lodging, food, gear, and home to the Olympic whitewater rafting trials. We'd been back on the trail for only a short 25 miles and were already in sight of our next hotel room. We were meeting my sister Becky and her husband Pat. The section was wonderful. My feet were happy and the sun was shining. It was a great day to be in the woods. It was also prayer card day. One of the schools that was following my adventure was All Saints Catholic School in Bangor, Maine. The 4th and 5th graders made prayer cards for me. Before I left home, I had uploaded each one of them to my blog for future posts on Wednesdays and Sundays. I had enough to last the whole trip. That day's prayer requested I have a great trip, and I was having a great trip, even though things were not going quite as planned. I had way more foot pain than expected. I knew there would be rain, but one can never prepare for it in full. Our mileage was way behind my planned schedule, and I could tell Andrew was not enjoying himself, so I felt some of that stress too. Despite all those circumstances, it was a great trip. I stayed focused on the positive the best I could. I allowed myself to have tiny pity parties and sometimes mini tantrums, but they were short-lived. Then I would put my positive attitude back on and chose to have a great day. Some days were more challenging than others. I would remember all my friends, family, students and blog followers. With God's grace and their support, I had the strength I needed to persist. I was ahead of Andrew and I ended up hiking a while with Papillon. He was from Arizona and a very pleasant person to be around. We met up at Cold Spring Shelter, a quaint structure that was beginning to show its age. A spring crossed the trail right in front of the building, and there was also a 2-person picnic table next to a fire pit. It was the perfect location for lunch. We enjoyed each other's conversation and joked about the mice that were not bothered by our presence. In fact, they seemed happy we were there. Papillon did not like mice. No one did. He was all too aware of the nuisance they caused on the trail. He told me about the night he left a half-eaten Snickers bar on the mesh ceiling shelf built into his tent. The next morning, while packing up, he had forgotten about the candy bar until he saw the empty wrapper and a hole in the top of his tent. Later in the day, another fire tower presented itself to me. I was alone this time and attempted the creaky old structure. Halfway up, the stairs took a hard left, changing from sturdy with a railing on each side to a skinny, shaky rise with only one railing. I retreated to the safety of the ground and hiked on. I hadn't gone far when I heard another hiker approach the tower. I watched as he climbed right up, as most of the young hikers do. He encouraged me to do the same, promising to stay with me as long as I needed. It was another beautiful 360-degree unhindered panorama of the landscape. Just as I thought it couldn't get any prettier, it did. Thanks to Blaze for helping me with my fear of heights, I was able to take in just one more fantastic view on the Appalachian Trail. The NOC was in sight. We had a 6-mile drop between us and hot food. We arrived just in time to catch lunch at the River's End restaurant, and yes, it was on the edge of the river. We sat outside while we feasted on burgers and fries, waiting for Becky and Pat to arrive. They were going to whisk us away to nearby Cherokee. My sister and her husband lived in Georgia at the time and loved casinos. They were our trail angels that day, splurging for adjoining rooms at Harrah's Hotel and Casino. We kept the dividing door open, creating one large suite. After I enjoyed a long hot soak in the jacuzzi while they tried their luck at the slots, we went to the Diamond Club, a lounge reserved for VIP guests. That would be Becky and Pat. Andrew and I just tagged along on their coattails. Aromas from hot and cold hors d'oeuvre filled the room, making our senses dance for joy and our tummies grumble. It was more than enough to make a meal. We ate until we were content. Our plan was to spend just the one night and then get back on the trail. The room was so inviting and it was nice to be with family. We found it hard to leave, so we didn't. Becky and Pat were gracious. They were planning on 2 nights anyway, so we stayed. This made our 3rd 0 day on the trail and our 7th night with a real roof over our heads. In only 18 days. No wonder Bruce thought we would be celebrating Thanksgiving on the top of Katahdin. Dinner the second night was the biggest all-you-can-eat buffet I'd ever seen. Andrew skipped this and had alone time in the room and a walk around the complex with Mozzie. I was not skipping any chance to fill up. There was so much food that I didn't even get to all the stations. It wasn't the best I'd ever eaten, but it did the trick. I ate until I couldn't move. Then I ate some more. As much as we enjoyed the company of family and very much appreciated their generosity, the next morning it would be time to pack up and head back to the Nantahala Outdoor Centre. We woke up on March the 28th in our cosy hotel to a fresh layer of powdery snow. A white carpet dusted the rooftops and the mountains. Stealing a line from the movie Apollo 13, I sent an urgent text to Bruce, who was in Florida now. It read, "Houston, we have a problem." Back home, a nice little dusting of snow is welcomed, but today this thrilled neither of us. I was not a fan of the cold. I hated being cold. Cold was the worst. Nothing works right when the mercury drops. Your body, your gear, the ground, everything is off. I was glad we had taken the extra day, so I did not have to wake up to a snow-covered tent. I was not prepared to spend the night in the mountains with forecasted temps dipping into the teens. In the spirit of minimalism, I had given Bruce all my extra winter gear I didn't think I would need until the Smokies. Becky and Pat offered to pay for a third night, but Andrew and I didn't want to overextend our stay. We figured we could hike 13 miles that day, then Bruce could pick us up at the other end, if only we could reach him. As we drove back to the NOC, there was more snow on the ground. Pat dropped us off exactly where he had picked us up. We had to walk through the NOC complex, which was officially AT blazed. Becky joined us for this quarter-mile section, then we said our goodbyes. There was no reply to the distress text I had sent hubby. Why wasn't he answering me when it was obvious I needed help? Why else would I have used such a quote? Anyone who has seen the movie Apollo 13 knows the crew was in grave danger when the actor Tom Hanks spoke those words to NASA. I, too, was in perceived danger. We headed into the woods. We had a 6-mile drop into the NOC and the climb out was just as extreme. Still no reply from Bruce. I called again. No answer. For real? What was he doing? It was early morning, but we're morning people. I could not understand why he wasn't answering. Had he gone to the Sunshine State and forgotten about me? I called his parents' phone numbers. He was there to visit and work. They said he was still sleeping. Not anymore, was my thought. I didn't ask, I demanded, wake him up. Andrew and I hiked from the NOC to Stakar Gap. It was a beautiful hike. The sky was crystal blue and the air cool and crisp. As we climbed in elevation, there was more snow accumulation. We were warm as long as we kept moving. Breaks were short and few. In places where the snow was deeper, the trail became packed and slippery from all the hiker traffic. For the first time since leaving Amicalola Falls, I slipped and fell. A fallen tree blocked the trail. When I stepped over it, the slick surface caused my other foot to slide right out from under me. I slid a full body length down the slope and catching the heel of each boot on something prevented me from sliding down the snow-covered, forested mountainside. It was a close one. I lay on my back, looking up at the sky and thanking God I didn't go any farther. It was by His saving grace that I stopped when I did. Continuing down the slope would have been a rough ride, bouncing from tree trunk to tree trunk. When I realised I would be okay, I noticed my jelly beans were safely clutched in the bag I was holding in my right hand. At Stakar Gap, we hitched a $25 shuttle ride, arranged by my now awake Bruce, back to the NOC where we had started that morning. We wanted to stay at a hotel closer to the trail, but they would not accept dogs. Refusing us was illegal since Mozzie was a service dog, but we were too tired to complain. Instead, we rented a bunk room at the NOC, also arranged by Bruce. It would be a far cry from Harrah's, but once we were asleep, we wouldn't know the difference. Our shuttle driver dropped us off at the River's End restaurant. We needed cash to pay him, a fact we were unaware of until we arrived at our destination. We assumed he could take a cheque or a form of electronic payment, like all the others up to this point had done. Neither one of us had enough dineros, and there was no ATM. A lady at the bar overheard us discussing our dilemma and offered to front me the cash to pay the driver. Wow, I didn't expect that. I told her I would not be able to repay her until the morning when my husband arrived. She said no worries. She worked there and would be around. Trail magic comes when you need it the most and least expect it. Good continues to go around. Before locating our bunk room on the NOC complex, we had barely enough time to eat. The restaurant was getting ready to close, but if we could order fast, they would let us in. Hamburgers and fries were a quick and easy choice. The burgers were so good there, best on the trail. The beef was grass-fed and locally grown. With full tummies and no worries of having to sleep in the cold, we hiked up to our cabin. There we found a lunch lady in the bunk room next door. She had received a care package with wine sent to the NOC, and she invited me over. She and I dug out our hiking cups and enjoyed a half bottle each of the relaxing juice. It was nice to have some girl time, something I did not realise I would miss out on the trail. It was a splendid end to a long day. It wasn't nearly as traumatic as I had perceived it could have been. As a matter of fact, it was an uneventful and beautiful day on the trail. Bruce wished he could have said the same about his day. Here's his version of the rescue. The rescue story really began when I left Emily, aka Black Bear, Andrew and his dog Mozzie on top of Springer Mountain that cold, rainy morning. I thought they were never going to leave, so I left first and hiked south, back to my car at Amicalola. I flew down the mountain, covering the 8+ miles in about 2.5 hours. I had to catch a flight in Atlanta for a business trip. Rain and cold filled Emily and Andrew's days, while mine were packed with travelling for work and long hours taking care of business to fund this journey of hers. After leaving them at Springer Mountain, the plan was that I would meet them again at Neal Gap after their 5th day of hiking. I would fly back to Atlanta. Travel delays prevented me from reaching them in time at Neal Gap, so Jimmy and I believe stepped in. They collected Emily and her hiking partners and drove them south to the Holiday Inn in Gainesville, Georgia, where I had made reservations. I drove north from the Atlanta airport. We pulled into the Holiday Inn at the same time. Jimmy and I believe returned to Neal Gap, where they had a cabin and where I would drop Emily, Andrew and Mozzie back off less than 24 hours later. But first, Emily was all business with her A-game on. While Andrew kept to himself and relaxed, Emily was full of orders. She gets like that sometimes. At home, when she wants everyone to know she has stuff to accomplish, she puts on a Sarge hat from her NROTC days. Emily never did go into the service, but she acts like she did. She doesn't mean to be demanding, she just gets focused on the tasks at hand. And on this day, that task was getting ready to get back to the trail. So I spent the evening following orders. Laundry, resupplying food, and the night's meal were part of my chores. Not really sure what she did. The night was over before we knew it, and it was time for me to chauffeur them back to Neal Gap. Since I then had a 7-hour drive to Florida where I would be staying at my parents' and working remotely, I didn't stay to visit with Jimmy, I believe, Andrew and Emily. I have the luxury of working at home, but also travel often, visiting customers. It was March the 14th, our son Patch's birthday, when I left Emily, Andrew and Mozzie for their 0 day in the care of Jimmy and I believe. I knew this was a difficult day for her since she would be away for the first time for one of our son's birthday. The next day was my birthday, so she had 2 days to be homesick. The plan was to reunite with Emily and her hiking buddies at Fontana Dam. She was off having fun in the woods and I was heading back to work, setting up office at my parents' place in Florida. I spent the next 2 weeks working extremely long hours with little sleep. I was looking forward to the leisurely drive to Fontana Dam to reunite with Emily. That plan was foiled when my dad woke me and handed me the phone. It was Emily on the other end, in a panic. I had a difficult time waking up. I'd worked well past midnight on an urgent project for work, and now Emily was insisting I get up because she didn't want to spend the night in the cold, wet snow. What was I supposed to do? I was at least 8 hours away. I got up, that's what I did, and went into logistics mode. First, I needed to pick up a rental car. That required Mum and Dad to drive me 1.5 hours in the opposite direction from the Villages, Florida, to Orlando International Airport. After securing my rental car, I headed back to the Villages to pack. From the Villages to the NOC is about 536 miles and about 8 hours and 40 minutes of driving time. When I was finally ready to head north, the interstate was a parking lot. While I sat in traffic and crawled north, I arranged a shuttle to pick up the hikers at Staccara Gap, where Emily, Andrew and Mozzie would end the day. The driver would take them back to the NOC where they had started that morning. I also booked them a bunk room at the NOC. In Emily's defence, they didn't have any cell service in that area to make the calls themselves, but she could have toughed it out and slept in a tent. Over 14 hours later, at about 2:30 a.m, I finally arrived at the NOC, but I couldn't go to bed just yet. For the last 15 years or so, I committed to reading every day. So, before I went to the bunk room, I remained in the car and did my daily 15 minutes of reading. The 3 of them were snug in their bunks, and I was exhausted from the drive from hell. Once inside, I still couldn't close my eyes yet because Emily was so excited to see me and insisted on telling me trail stories. Finally, I was able to put my head on my pillow and fall into a deep sleep, but that didn't last long. It seemed like I hadn't even gone to sleep when at 5:30 a.m. I was told we needed to get breakfast and get them back to the trail. That wasn't such a bad thing. The food at the River's Edge restaurant was every bit as good as Emily boasted about. I may have been tired, but at least I was well fed. I wish that was the end of the story, but my job was not done yet. Emily and Andrew had food drop boxes I needed to deliver to a trail angel, Connie. Connie had reached out to Emily during Emily's pre-hike planning and offered Emily, Andrew and Mozzie a free shuttle and a night at Connie's house halfway through the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Once again, Emily and her hiking buddies hiked north, and I went my own way. This time I was headed to Knoxville, Tennessee, to meet up with Connie. It was a 2-hour drive. I've never minded driving. In fact, I enjoy new sights and visiting new places. But on less than 3 hours of sleep that day, it was not the day to travel the route I took. According to a Google search in the May 26, 2014 edition of the Condé Nast Traveller, there was an article titled Extreme Drives, the 10 Scariest Highways for White-Knuckle Road Trips, written by Marissa Lascala. Listed in that article was Tail of the Dragon. She writes, the 11-mile stretch of US 129 at Deals Gap starting at the North Carolina-Tennessee border, is said to have 318 curves. I didn't count the curves with names like Pearly Gates, Break or Bust Bend, and Gravity Cavity. I focused on not driving off them instead. While I heeded the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, others did not. The Tail of the Dragon is popular with motorcyclists and car lovers who seek the need for speed and the thrill of death-defying curves. In fact, spectators and professional photographers lined this stretch of the road, capturing the wannabe racers in their hair-raising feats of bravery or stupidity, depending on how one looks at it. I'm sure, though, me and my rented Ford Taurus were of no interest to any of them. I definitely need to visit this stretch of road again, but after a full night's sleep. Safely making it through the Tail of the Dragon, I continued to Connie's house at Knoxville to deliver the food boxes. From Knoxville, I drove another 65 miles, taking me an hour and 40 minutes to Fontana Dam to meet Emily and Andrew. Side note, Emily never did go to Connie's house. That food drop required almost 4 hours of driving. If I'd gone directly from Staccato Gap, where I dropped Emily off that morning, then drove straight to Fontana Dam, where I would meet them at day's end, it would have only taken 20 minutes. I pulled out all the stops to help Emily during those first weeks on the trail. It was a far cry from her initial plan of me only seeing her once a month, but I really didn't mind. She spent the first 25 years of our marriage taking care of our home and giving up her career to raise the boys. It was a joy for me to help her on this journey in the best way that I could. And if it meant I lost a few hours of sleep, so be it. She's worth it. It was truly amazing after that stint that Bruce did not insist I pack up and go home. He's always been so forgiving. I didn't think anything could top the mercy he had extended to me back in 1988 when I showed up at the ring dance on crutches, but this rescue mission did. I'd like to say our dating was smooth sailing on the courtship seas, but that wasn't the case either. After 2.5 months of dating, fun and excitement, out of the blue, he broke up with me. It was horrible and kind of mean. It was another hockey game date night. I'd secured tickets for us and a couple of his friends. They were right on time to pick me up. I can't really remember exactly how our relationship shredded. What I do remember was I was ready to go to the game, and then I was suddenly dateless, boyfriendless, and crying. And he went away with all the tickets. Apparently, an old girlfriend had decided she wanted him back, so I was thrown overboard, and she returned to the helm. That night, I went to the library and wrote a few short poems for my writing class. Up to that point, my instructor and classmates hated my work, but the pieces that flowed from my pen that evening received great praise. The work was dark, sad, and depressing. To this day, I still don't understand why people relish in others' pain. We see it every day in the media, where the headlines are filled with horrific stories, while the article about a Good Samaritan often goes unnoticed. If only we as a society would be more excited about finding the good and exploiting the good, even if it is minuscule, how much happier we all would be. Just maybe there will be less of the bad. That's what I was reaching for on my hike. I really tried to focus on the positive, even when I was in the midst of not-so-happy events. I focused my sadness that night of the breakup into my writings, and my C grade for writing prose turned into a B. Looking back, I don't think I would have been able to bring up my grade without the pain. Pain causes us to learn and grow, but we must not focus on it. After a brief separation, Bruce decided we should be together. Miss X wasn't so desirable after all. I mean, really, once you've been exposed to all of my goodness, how could anyone else compare? Our spring semester flew by, completing his junior year of college and my junior/senior year. I wasn't really sure what year I was. I was on the extended plan. Goodness continued. For a while, anyways.